Good morning. I'm impressed that so many of you made it here this morning. You got your coffee, and clearly there weren't too many of you out checking out the breweries last night because you're here and you look fairly awake. So that's a good start. So I'm very pleased to be introducing this topic because I think it's a critical and timely topic. Given a number of the challenges that we're facing in communities, we absolutely need to be thinking more creatively, thinking about private sector type solutions, and thinking about partnerships that we could leverage with the private sector. And my goal this morning in introducing a great plenary that we have today is to address three influencing factors that I think necessitate changing the business model at the community level. And that first factor is growing population and urbanization. Second, declining resources at the community level. And then the third is the uncertainty and risk that climate change is presenting to our communities. So our population in the United States has grown by an average of 2 million people a year over the last 5 years. And just in 2016, we're expected to have an average increase of 1 person every 17 seconds. So as this presentation goes on, you can just think about how our population is growing. And increasingly, that population is being located in our urban centers. 83% of our population, they're urban dwellers. So this has a big influence on the cities that you are all leading and working in. And this is a global trend. This is true worldwide. For the first time ever in our history, in 2007, our urban population started to surpass our rural population. So as we think about what that's going to mean for cities, as we think about increased infrastructure demands, increased services, this is going to have a major impact that we need to be paying attention to. And this is at a time when we can't maintain our existing infrastructure. We have a $3.6 trillion deficit just to maintain our existing infrastructure through 2020. Just fixing our water pipes alone is estimated to cost $1 trillion over the next 25 years. So this is a huge impact that we need to be paying attention to. And as we look at our communities, we're continuing to see some modest improvement in our local economies, but not enough to make up for the last 6 years. This was a survey done by the National League, and in most cities are reporting that they're seeing an increase in infrastructure costs, an increase of costs to all sorts of services and benefits that they need to provide. Most cities are seeing an increase in state and federal mandates, and most cities at the same time are seeing a decrease in state and federal funding. So this is going to mean a whole new level of creativity as we look for community solutions. And part of that creativity will need to be how do we leverage the private sector dollars that are available. Climate change is going to introduce even greater uncertainty and greater risk into the system and create even more challenges for our infrastructure and for our public health. If you look at these extreme weather events, and we've seen this year after year, and this is just 2014, the expenses that we're already facing because of climate change. In 2015, Citigroup reported an estimated $192 trillion cost of inaction on climate change. If we don't do something, we're going to see increasing impacts in our communities. So there's a necessity to act on this, despite the challenges. And this message is taking root. In December, we had 195 nations agree to take action on climate change. And if you think about what's happening in Congress, now we can't agree on anything. To have 195 nations all come together and say that we have to act on climate change, that's a big deal. And at the Conference of Parties where this agreement was reached, there was a large recognition that this is not just a global issue. This is not just about nations. There's a large role for subnational entities as well, and in particular, cities. And there's good reason that they recognize this. Cities they make up 80% of the world's GDP. They're responsible for about 70% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And as I said, our populations live there, about 50% worldwide and even higher in the United States at 83%. So as we think about moving forward, as we think about these large challenges that we have to face with limited funds to face these challenges, we have to be creative. We can no longer afford to have our public dollars spent in a way that achieves one benefit. We have to achieve multiple benefits for every public dollar spent, and we need to figure out how to leverage additional private sector funds along with those dollars that we're spending. And at the nexus of meeting the needs of our growing cities and the climate change impacts we're going to be facing are electricity and transportation, as the sectors that have are responsible for the largest amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So communities and corporations that understand this can position themselves to be at the forefront of the clean economy moving forward. So I'm going to present a couple opportunities in this space, and I'm calling them disruptive innovations because I recognize these solutions aren't without their controversy. They are not intended to be silver bullets, but they're intended to spark a discussion about emerging markets, about potential partnerships, and about areas where the public sector can get involved with new innovative solutions to meet growing needs. We've seen corporations tapped into large markets, growing markets, with huge financial success and the ability to have huge environmental impacts for good or bad as well. And we're obviously talking here about how we can optimize the good benefits out of these services. Uber is worth $40 billion, and they don't own a single car. This is at a time when we can't afford new public transit, and we certainly can't afford to maintain our existing transit. So we need to be paying attention to these trends. And companies that understand that there's a shift away from a preference for ownership towards a preference for access are able to position themselves well in the new economy. They understand that you compare technology to connect people to the places they want to go and to the services that they need. Car sharing in the United States has increased by almost threefold. So there's a large increase already in people that are saying, I don't need to own my own car. And we're already seeing tremendous environmental benefits. There's been an average of 35% reduction in vehicle miles traveled for people who join car sharing, and an average of $300 in household savings per month for people who are taking this on. And this is critical that we find innovations in this space. Our cars are sitting idle 23 hours of the day. For the cars that are on our crumbling, congested roads, 80% of those seats are empty. So there's a tremendous room for innovation in this space. We're already seeing services like Uber Pool and Lyft Line that are starting to get more people into those cars. So Lyft Line has been available in San Francisco and LA for about a year and a half, and they've already seen that an average of 50% of their rides are taking advantage of this carpool option. That's substantial if you think about how much public investment has gone into trying to get people to carpool with fairly nominal results. And it's even more astounding when you think about the fact that Lyft says 90% of their rides, there's another person taking that ride within 5 minutes. So I'm willing to bet that a large portion of those people would wait a few minutes if their fare could be split in half, or split even further than that. So there's large potential here. And while this says, match Muni and kind of makes a joke about we can offer such low rides that we're matching the public transit, to me, the opportunity is not to match Muni. The opportunity is to provide access in areas where there isn't Muni, where there isn't public transit, and there's an opportunity to connect to the transit that exists. Lyft in the Bay Area has said that 20% of their rides start and end at transit. So if you think about the potential of first mile, last mile, and of leveraging these companies to serve our neighborhoods and areas that do not have transit, the potential could be fairly substantial. Again, these aren't without their controversy, but they are a growing part of our local economies, and a number of local governments are seeing that there is some benefit to that. So the question is, how do we address the concerns? Because there are real concerns. How do we address concerns about safety and liability? How do we address concerns about our traditional services and our traditional workers? And how do we optimize the benefit side of this? How do we provide even more increased services? How do we provide even more economic development? And how do we provide equitable access to these services? The second critical sector is energy. As we look at climate change and increased temperatures due to climate change, and we think about our growing cities, we're going to have a real stress to our grid, and we're going to have a huge problem on our hands with additional energy use and greenhouse gas emissions if we're not innovating in this space. And one of the major barriers to advance energy communities has been energy storage. Tesla created major waves last year when they announced this, their new Powerwall battery pack storage. This has the potential to make storing energy from your solar panels during the day to power your home and charge your electric vehicle at night a reality. They have 100,000 reservations for these already, worth $1 billion. So this could be a major game changer. And especially when you combine that with financing to make it accessible to more people. How many of you have PACE financing in your state or in your communities? So Property Assessed Clean Energy provides financing to do energy and water upgrades on your homes and your businesses. It's provided no cost up front to local homeowners. They're able to do these large upgrades and pay for it through the savings on their utility bills. Just in California, our largest PACE provider, private PACE provider, Hero, has financed over $1 billion in projects to over 50,000 homes, creating 10,000 plus local jobs, creating savings for homeowners across the state in over $2.2 billion. These are substantial energy reduction, greenhouse gas emission reductions, and water reductions. They work in partnership with communities, but this is all private sector funding, having major results in communities. These are the type of win-win strategies that we need to be able to identify. And this is increasingly available throughout the nation. So this could be, again, another game changer. So again, the question is, how do we assure that the communities that we serve are getting the benefits out of these innovations, whether it's the ones I talked about or other private sector partnerships or private sector type solutions? Because we know if these strategies aren't utilized in a way that lifts up our most disadvantaged communities, that don't lift up our residents that need these solutions the most, it's not smart growth. And we're not going to have economic prosperity, and we're going to continue to have political unrest. And we've talked about this throughout the conference, but we can't continue to have residents' life outcomes more determined by their zip code than their genetic code. So we have to do better. What we need is a vision that we can fight for together, that's worth fighting for. We need to have tomorrow a future that looks better than it does today. We need to have a future for Ron Sims' grandkids, for Puck's kids, for all of our kids and grandkids that is better than what residents are experiencing now. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to the discussion that we're going to have.